Welcome back, everyone. Feels like we've been on quite the odyssey, huh? These past few episodes, really trekking through the intricate world of GPCRs.
It has been a pretty deep dive, that's for sure.
But here we are, day 15. And it feels like we're finally reaching the summit, Time to take in that panoramic view.
I like that analogy. We've definitely covered a lot of ground, delving into all the mechanics of these fascinating cellular gatekeepers.
We have. But now we get to zoom out a bit, see how all those intricate details we've been exploring actually translate to real-world applications.
Exactly. It's all about connecting the dots.
So let's start with the here and now. Just how significant are GPCRs as drug targets in today's world? Give us a sense of scale.
It's interesting because most people probably don't realize just how many medications they or someone they know are taking that directly target GPCRs.
I'll admit, I don't think I do.
It's really quite remarkable when you look at the numbers.
Okay, I'm intrigued. Lay it on me.
Okay, are you ready for this? We're talking about a staggering 34% of all FDA-approved drugs.
Whoa, hold on. Did you say 34%?
34%. That's more than 1 in every 3 medications working through these intricate GPCR pathways.
Wow. That's a much MUCH bigger impact than I ever would have guessed.
Yeah.
So we're not just talking about niche treatments here, right?
Not at all. These are frontline medications for a huge range of conditions.
Okay, so let's get specific. What are some examples people might recognize?
Well, let's take beta blockers, for example. I'm sure you've heard of those.
Yeah, of course. Aren't
Yeah.
those prescribed for high blood pressure, heart condition?
Exactly. Everything from high blood pressure to heart failure. And they work by targeting beta-adrenergic receptors,
Which are?
a specific type of GPCR. So there you go.
Okay, that makes sense. Those are regulating heart function. What about something totally different?
Like what?
Well, we've talked about the role of GPCRs in pain management before.
Right, and that's another perfect example. Opioid medications, which I'm sure most people are unfortunately familiar with.
Badly, yes.
Well, they actually work by interacting with mu-opioid receptors.
Which are, wait for it,
another member of the GPCR family. You're catching on.
it's just amazing to think that so many different treatments for such varied conditions all converge on this one family of proteins.
It really speaks to just how crucial understanding GPCRs is for medicine as a whole.
It does, and the story doesn't end there, right? I mean, the tools we have for studying GPCRs are constantly evolving.
Oh, absolutely. We're able to uncover more and more about these complex proteins all the time.
We touched on one of those tools, time-resolved-FRET.
TR-FRET, yes.
But if I'm being honest, it was all a bit molecular ballet for me back then.
I can understand that. It's a very visually driven technique, but the applications are incredibly practical.
Okay, well, walk me through it again then. How does TR-FRET actually help us design better drugs?
Well, imagine this. You can actually track these tiny molecular players, like dancers, in a complex ballet in real time.
So you can see the precise moment a GPCR is activated.
Exactly. You're essentially witnessing that intricate signaling cascade that unfolds within the cell. Front row seat to the whole show.
Wow, that's pretty incredible. So it's not just about capturing those pretty pictures then. It's about seeing the how of GPCR activation.
You got it. And that's crucial for designing targeted therapies. The more we understand the exact sequence of events, the better we can intervene.
Okay, that's starting to click for me now. TR-FRET lets researchers see how those GPCRs get activated. And that's the key to designing those targeted therapies.
Yeah.
But the tools aren't the only things evolving, are they?
No, you're right. The ligands themselves are constantly being refined as well.
Ligands, those are
The molecules that bind to GPCRs, like a key fitting into a lock, remember?
Right. The right key for the right lock triggers the response you want.
And researchers are always on the hunt for those new and improved keys, so to speak.
To unlock those cellular responses with more finesse.
Precisely. Imagine a ligand that can target a specific subtype of GPCR, say one involved in inflammation without affecting other processes.
So instead of that one-size-fits-all approach, we're getting more personalized.
We are. And that's incredibly exciting. This fine-tuning of ligands could lead to medications that are more effective with fewer side effects.
It all comes back to that concept of bias signaling we discussed, right?
Exactly.
Where some ligands activate a GPCR in a way that favors certain pathways.
It's like having a master key that can unlock multiple doors, but each door leads to a different room.
I like that analogy.
Yeah.
So we're learning how to modulate that GPCR activity in a much more nuanced way, not just on or off anymore.
Exactly. And that nuance is what opens up a whole new world of therapeutic possibilities.
This all reminds me of something I wanted to ask earlier. With so much happening in biomedicine these days, why are GPCRs still such hot targets? I mean, haven't we known about them forever?
It's a great question, and there are a couple of key reasons. One is their sheer versatility. GPCRs are involved in so many different processes, from regulating heart function, like we talked about, to controlling things like mood and even how we perceive the world.
Wow, they really are everywhere, aren't they? Like that multi-purpose tool everyone has in their kitchen drawer, the one you use for everything.
Huh. That's a great analogy. And because they play such diverse roles, they offer a treasure trove of potential targets for drug development. But there's another crucial factor that makes them so appealing: their accessibility.
Ah, right. They're conveniently located on the surface of cells, which makes them much easier to target with medications compared to proteins that are buried deep inside.
Exactly. That combination of versatility and accessibility is a real win-win for drug developers. Plus, the more we learn about GPCRs, the more we realize just how complex and nuanced their signaling is. It's like peeling back the layers of an onion, always new surprises.
So it's not just about location, it's about the depth of what they do. And it sounds like we still have a lot to learn.
Oh, absolutely. We're just scratching the surface. And the exciting part is the insights we gain from studying GPCRs, they extend far beyond just this one family of proteins.
In what way?
Well, by understanding how they function, how they interact with those ligands, how they trigger those signaling cascades, we're gaining valuable knowledge about cellular communication as a whole.
So it's like learning the language of the cells.
Exactly. And once you know the language, you can start to have more meaningful conversations. You can understand the complexities of how cells talk to each other and how those conversations can go wrong in disease.
That's incredible. So these tiny proteins, these gatekeepers to our cells, they're not just targets for therapies. They're also teaching us about the very fundamentals of how our bodies work.
They are. It's really quite remarkable.
It is. It's mind-boggling when you think about it, these tiny proteins orchestrating such complex processes.
It is. And we've only just begun to unravel the intricacies of their signaling. Remember that concept of bias signaling we discussed earlier?
Yeah, where different ligands can activate a GPCR in a way that favors certain pathways over others.
Exactly. Well, that's just the tip of the iceberg. Researchers are discovering even more ways that GPCRs can fine-tune their responses.
Like what?
Well, for instance, some GPCRs can actually couple to multiple different signaling partners inside the cell.
So it's not just about which pathway they activate, but also WHO they're partnering with.
Precisely. And those different partners can lead to very distinct downstream effects.
It's like a cellular dance, where the GPCR is leading, but the choice of partner dictates the steps.
I love that analogy. It really captures the dynamic nature of these interactions. And the more we understand about these partnerships, the more potential targets we have for drug development.
Okay, so more potential targets. That's good, right?
It is, because it gives us more options for fine-tuning those cellular responses. We might be able to design drugs that promote beneficial partnerships while disrupting those that lead to disease.
So it's not just about blocking the GPCR altogether, but about nudging it towards the right partners.
Exactly. And that level of precision is what we're striving for in drug development. But there's another layer of complexity we haven't even touched on yet: GPCR oligomerization.
Oligomerization? That sounds intense.
It sounds complicated, but the concept is actually pretty straightforward. It's simply the idea that GPCRs can come together and form clusters, or oligomers.
So instead of acting solo, they're teaming up.
Precisely. And when they team up, their signaling properties can change dramatically.
So it's like the difference between a solo act and a full-blown orchestra.
Exactly. The collective sound is much richer and more complex, and that's what we're seeing with GPCR oligomers. They can integrate signals from multiple sources and generate a much more nuanced response.
That's incredible. But I imagine it makes things even more challenging to study.
Oh, absolutely. Trying to dissect the interactions within these oligomers, it's like trying to untangle a massive knot of yarn, but the potential payoff is huge. If we can understand how these oligomers form and function, it could revolutionize drug development.
So,
Well, imagine designing drugs that target specific oligomers, promoting or disrupting their formation to modulate cellular responses. It opens up a whole new world of possibilities.
okay, I have to admit, this is all getting a bit over my head, but the takeaway is, the more we learn about GPCRs, the more intricate and fascinating their signaling turns out to be.
That's exactly right. And we're only just beginning to scratch the surface, but all of these discoveries, they're not just academic curiosities, they have real implications for human health.
Because the more we understand about how GPCRs work, the better we can target them with therapies.
Right. Precisely. And that brings us to some of the specific areas where GPCR research is making a real difference. For instance, you might be surprised to learn that GPCRs play a key role in regulating energy homeostasis.
Energy homeostasis, that sounds pretty fancy. What does it mean?
It's basically our body's energy balance, how we store and burn energy, our appetite, our metabolism.
So things like obesity and metabolic disorders.
Exactly. And that makes GPCRs a prime target for developing new treatments for these conditions, which are becoming increasingly prevalent worldwide.
Makes sense. We've all heard of hormones like leptin and ghrelin that regulate hunger. Are those acting through GPCRs?
Many of them are. There's a specific GPCR called the melanocortin-4 receptor, or MC4R for short.
MC4R, okay. What does that one do?
Well, it plays a crucial role in regulating food intake, and mutations in this receptor can actually lead to insatiable hunger and severe obesity.
Wow, that's a powerful example of how a single GPCR can have a huge impact on our health. It's not just theoretical.
It's not, and it's not just obesity either. GPCRs are implicated in a whole range of diseases: cardiovascular disease, cancer, even neuropsychiatric disorders like depression and anxiety.
It sounds like we're just scratching the surface of what GPCRs can teach us about human health and disease. There's so much potential there.
And here's another fascinating twist. We've mainly talked about GPCRs as being located on the surface of cells, acting as those gatekeepers.
Right.
Well, emerging research is revealing a whole new dimension to GPCR signaling: nuclear GPCRs.
Nuclear GPCRs, you mean they're inside the nucleus of the cell?
Exactly. And while we're still unraveling all of their functions, it seems they may play a role in regulating gene expression.
Gene expression, that's the blueprint for how our cells operate, right?
Exactly. So these nuclear GPCRs, they're not just responding to signals from outside the cell, they might be influencing the cell's core operations from within.
Wow, that's incredible. It's like these GPCRs, they have their fingers in every pie.
They do.
Yeah.
And this is just one example of how GPCR research is constantly pushing the boundaries of what we know. The deeper we dive, the more we realize how much more there is to discover.
It really is amazing. It makes you appreciate just how complex our bodies are and how much we still don't know.
It's humbling, isn't it?
It is. But with all this incredible progress we've been talking about, are there still challenges when it comes to GPCR research?
Oh, of course. I mean, GPCRs are, by their very nature, incredibly complex and dynamic proteins.
How so?
Well, they're constantly changing their shapes, interacting with all sorts of partners inside the cell. It's like trying to observe a single dancer in a crowded ballroom.
Okay, I can picture that.
But now imagine everyone's constantly moving and switching partners. It's a very dynamic environment.
That sounds like a nightmare to try and study.
It can be, and that dynamic nature makes it really challenging to study GPCRs in their natural environment.
To capture those fleeting interactions, those nuances of behavior.
Yeah, exactly. Like trying to capture lightning in a bottle.
So how do scientists overcome those challenges?
Well, they're a resourceful bunch. They're constantly developing new tools and techniques. For instance, computational modeling is becoming increasingly important in GPCR research.
Oh, right. I've heard about that. It's like creating a virtual laboratory.
It is. You can actually simulate those complex interactions, see how GPCRs behave in different scenarios.
So it's a way to test hypotheses in a virtual world before you even set foot in the lab.
Exactly. It can really accelerate the drug development process.
That makes sense. So it's this blend of computational approaches and hands-on experiments that's really moving the field forward.
Absolutely. And it's leading to some really exciting breakthroughs.
Well, let's talk about some of those breakthroughs. Where is GPCR research making the biggest difference in human health right now?
Well, one area that might surprise you is energy homeostasis.
Energy homeostasis. Remind me what that is again.
Basically, it's your body's energy balance, how it stores and burns energy, appetite, metabolism, all of that.
So things like obesity and metabolic disorders.
Exactly. And GPCRs are key players in all of those processes, which makes them prime targets for new treatments.
We've all heard of those hormones that regulate hunger, like leptin and ghrelin. Are those working through GPCRs?
Many of them are. In fact, there's one specific GPCR called the melanocortin-4 receptor, or MC4R.
MC4R, got it.
Well, this receptor plays a critical role in regulating food intake, and mutations in this receptor can actually lead to insatiable hunger and severe obesity.
Wow, that's a powerful example of how much impact a single GPCR can have on our health.
It really is. And it highlights why understanding these pathways is so crucial.
It's not just obesity either, right?
Yeah.
We talked earlier about how GPCRs are involved in a whole host of diseases.
Right, from cardiovascular disease to cancer, even neuropsychiatric disorders, the list goes on and on.
It seems like GPCRs are involved in everything.
They really are. And here's another twist. We've mostly focused on GPCRs that sit on the surface of cells, acting as those gatekeepers, right?
Right.
But emerging research is revealing a whole new dimension to GPCR signaling, nuclear GTCRs,
Nuclear GPCRs.
meaning they're actually located inside the nucleus of the cell.
Wow. So they're not just responding to signals from outside the cell, they're operating from within.
Exactly. And while we're still figuring out exactly what they do, it seems they might play a role in regulating gene expression.
Gene expression. That's like the instruction manual for how our cells operate.
Precisely. So it's a whole new layer of complexity and control.
It's incredible to think about how much we've learned about GPCRs, but also how much there still is to discover.
And that's the exciting part. We're constantly pushing the boundaries, asking new questions, developing new tools to probe these mysteries.
It's a journey with no end in sight, which I think is a good thing.
I agree. It keeps things interesting.
It does. So as we wrap up this deep dive into the world of GPCRs, what would you say is the biggest takeaway for our listeners?
For me, it's the sheer versatility of these proteins, their involvement in such a vast array of processes, from the everyday to the extraordinary. And the fact that we're still uncovering new aspects of their function, it just speaks to the endless possibilities of scientific exploration.
I think that's a perfect note to end on. The future of GPCR research is bright, and who knows what amazing discoveries await us just around the corner.
I can't wait to find out.
Me neither. And to our listeners, we hope you've enjoyed this journey as much as we have. Keep those questions coming, keep exploring, and join us next time for another deep dive into the fascinating world of science.
Until then.